Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us for this lunchtime debate, where we'll explore the future of the CMO in Asia. So a pretty meaty topic to get our teeth into. I'll now hand you to the session moderator, Seema Panwani, partner from R3, to introduce her panel.
So I'm just going to take maybe less than 10 minutes to take you through some findings about the future of CMO in Asia. And then the panel is going to come on board, and we're going to have some interesting Q&A. I was quite intrigued with the title of debate, so I hope they're going to live up to that and have some interesting conversations and debates for us. So let me just tell you a little bit about R3. We are a global consultancy, marketing consultancy that's homegrown from Singapore, and we are very proud of that. Our goal in life is to basically help all marketeers achieve better efficiencies and effectiveness in their marketing ROIs. You can see we work with pretty much top 12 of all the 20 marketeers in the world, including a MasterCard, Marina Bay Sands, and Samsung, and Unilever, etc. In our spare time, what we also do is write a lot of white papers and research insights, and we've written 2 books about Asia. The first one was China CMO, where we interviewed leading CMOs in China and spoke to them about the challenges of marketing and developing their brands in China. And this year we wrote Asia CMO, which has been extremely interesting because we had a varied range of CMOs from different countries, some with startups, some actually established companies. And we interviewed them, and some of the findings will be reflected in the next few slides that you see. So these are all the brands that we had interviewed, and on the top are all the different clients that we had that's featured in our books. So what we have is the theme. The book follows certain themes, and one, of course, the big ones is what are the challenges of marketing in Asia. And this was a great quote by Tiger Beers, which is, again, proud to be a homegrown brand, as to how do brands grow from Asia and when they grow globally, as well as the other way around. And of course, with the digital convergence, this is getting easier, but also tougher. What was interesting is this quote, where full points for honesty for all the people who we interviewed, but only 7% of the CMOs claimed that they feel their brand is actually prepared to navigate into the future. Now, this is quite a scary number, but at the same time, it does show that the way things are changing so soon and so quickly, it feels no one can today stand up and say, I'm completely prepared to face the future when it comes to marketing. Again, with the convergence of data and tech, people need to be prepared pretty much every day to face the challenges of the next day. Now, when it comes to data and tech, it was interesting that data and tech, maybe 10 years ago, was associated with all tech companies. You're an IBM, you're a Microsoft, you're an Apple, you're going to talk tech. Today, companies like Cafe Coffee Day, which is one of the leading coffee chains in India, is talking about how data and tech is becoming important to them and how they need to use different tools in order to engage with their target audience. And even though they are actually in the F&B space, and they are a physical cafe in physical parts of the world, but they actually need to have a great convergence. They need to understand their consumers through data and technology. But then 62% of the CMOs we interviewed said they were actually dissatisfied with how marketing leverages data and tech. This, again, goes back to the fact that as things keep on changing, and as new people join the organization, and we have so many millennials coming in, the way data and tech is also interpreted by old-timers like me and the millennials is very different. So that convergence is another hot topic that we're going to discuss later in the panel. Agency partnership. So we are lucky to have Arif on board. He's going to be one of the panelists. And I love this quote that he said, that if you're trying to build a big marketing company, you cannot claim that me, I'm going to do everything in-house. You are going to need help. Now, help can come from agencies, but now even the partnership ecosystem is evolving a lot. So it could be agencies, it could be your tech partners, it could be platforms like Facebook and Google, but everyone needs to come together in order to achieve the marketing effectiveness that is needed. But then 55% of our interviewees also said they were dissatisfied with their agency partners. I wouldn't hold this in very I wouldn't take it very seriously because usually everyone is always looking for something, what's next and who's better. As all the different dating apps in the world tell us, there's always someone better out there. But at R3, we always encourage marketeers that it's most important to make partnerships work. In some cases, we consider ourselves like a marriage counselor where we help clients as well as agencies to come together to resolve any gaps and actually work together to improve in order to have a finally better output. There's always constant debate on the regional, global, local dynamics. And while we don't want an ivory tower approach where someone sitting in North America is telling Asia what to do, at the same time, the challenge that is felt, Asia is extremely diverse. But then you cannot have every market doing its own thing because even though it is a diverse market, there are certain similarities. And the balancing act between how much needs to be actually customized versus efficiencies that need to be achieved, that is a tough job for CMOs in Asia today. And here again, another scary quote where only 3% of the CMOs interviewed said that they felt their marketing strategies was innovative. Because again, the way things are changing and with the great amount of creativity that is possible now, especially with tech merging with creativity, it is getting more and more difficult to have solutions or have ideas that are completely differentiated. And finally, my last slide, I want to end on this quote by the chairman of EDB, which is fantastic, and it talks about how the role of the CMO has evolved considerably, and now it is even more important for all CMOs to place their brand upfront and see how you're going to constantly build your brand. So with that, I would request my esteemed panel to come on stage. So good afternoon, and thank you very much for being here. What I would do is, if you guys could introduce yourself, we'll start with the lady first, and maybe tell one thing that you found in some of the stats that was either, I knew that, or that's a little surprising or scary.
Okay, hi everyone. I'm Andrea Peterson. I'm with Marina Bay Sands, so welcome. Hope you've been having a good conference. I actually was shocked at the number of well, the little number of people who are not feeling that their marketing strategies are innovative. I mean, innovation has to start with getting data, getting the insights, and working with your creative and your media partners. So that was a bit surprising to me because this is the way that we operate here.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Dane. I'm actually the Director for Marketing and Communications at the Singapore EDB, so I oversee the global marketing operations at the board. I hold a concurrent position, actually also at the Lee Kuan Yew School of Public Policy, so I run the External Affairs team on that side. Just quickly reacting to some of the feedback. So first and foremost, like what you said, Andrea, I'm shocked by the negativity that was in the presentation. I was like, oh my God, what am I getting into this today? But that said, I should also add that, and simply because I think if you step out of the marketing world, I do feel that a lot of the challenges and the pain is not just within the marketing professionals group of people. I think that's what business is seeing, a lot of challenges, complexity, so on and so forth. So it's a problem that's beyond just the industry itself.
Hi, I'm Arif. I'm the CEO of Chope, which is a restaurant booking, marketing platform here in Asia. We are in multiple cities across Asia, so have a pan-Asian view. I think the stat that resonated most with me, working with restaurants, which are very traditional businesses, even hotels, is that many of the CMOs felt that we weren't using the data and technology as effectively as they could have, and I think that's absolutely true, right? We see traditional businesses that are doing things that used to work previously and are reluctant to change because of inertia. There's this overriding attitude that if it ain't broken, why fix it? But I would argue that if you're not already adopting or embracing the digital marketing initiatives, then you're not an early adopter anymore. You're already behind the curve. Yeah.
So on that, when it comes to adopting technology, Andrea from Marina Bay Sands and the overall travel space, it is definitely one of the early adopters of technology, and online bookings have been happening for a very long time. But we also know that for properties like yours, you try to attract the luxury consumer. So how do you like trying to reach out to them in the digital space, and how do those challenges work?
That's a big question. It's not just the traveller, it's the, because we're an integrated resort, we have to look at multiple personas, as we have sort of coined them, whether they're travellers, whether they're experience seekers, whether they are here to shop, whether they're here to dine. There's a multitude of different personas as to how we would actually reach our customers. And one customer could be here having a business lunch and then be here in the evening seeing a show with their partner. They're still the same, they're kind of the same person, but they're in a different persona at a different time. So we've had to really find the human truth in why people will come here, and then hit them in a digital space to get them at the right time, to give the right message, so that we inspire them to convert, whether it be shopping, dining, or entertainment. So it is a big process for us to go through.
So Dean, and with EDB's perspective and putting that hat on, what are the challenges that brands face when they come to Asia, or they're trying to build their brands in Asia, and how it has changed in the last few years?
Right. So maybe from where I'm coming from, looking at how brand is managing itself in Asia. So I'm 45 years old this year, right? Or going 45. But
you're brave. You're telling your age on
I
a
try
stage.
very hard.
Very good.
So the reason for that is because I think what I'm trying to say is that when I first started this whole marketing career, we were taught the whole brand management process in quite a very different way from what we are seeing in Asia, I suspect. When we first went into practice, brand management or building brands, there was a certain discipline that was built behind that. But I think fast forward today in Asia, particularly the brands we've seen, whether it's Chope or in fact people like Grab and Gojek and BS to some extent, I think the way the opportunity exists in the way how the Asian marketeers, I think today, can help shape a new brand management narrative. And I think the time is now. I say this because I think and I see many young marketeers in this room here, maybe some young, some truly young, but that said, my point is that you now have a lot of tools that you have, right? You have digital tools. You're able to get the insights. You're able to define brand based on the customer need. You talk about the idea of truth, and I fully agree to that. So you're able to shape brand to a need. If you have read the CMO book, I think it was a perfect example about how Chanel has to adapt itself as an old heritage brand, heritage luxury brand, adapting itself to the Chinese market, redefining what luxury brand means by delivering the goods and services in a quicker, more cost-efficient manner to the customer. But that, to me, which seems to be a very boring attribute, like functional attribute, I just want speed, I want convenience, I want good service, which I think in traditional brand language is seen as, no, that's just functional attributes. But that in itself today defines brand. And I think in this market we are in today in Asia, I think a lot of you in this room could help redefine what is brand in this new narrative.
So Arif, I think you briefly touched upon in the introduction that you're working with technically a very traditional sector of restaurant owners who are probably not as forward-looking or still as traditional in their marketing.
Right.
So how does your company and you personally, your team, how do you try to make that shift with them?
Well, I think it starts from understanding the human truth, as Andrea says. Despite the channels being different, the content being different, the problem that we're trying to solve at the end of the day is the same one, and has been for the last, thousands and thousands of years. We're trying to feed people, find them a good place to have dinner, and go out with their friends. So that problem hasn't changed, and connecting that to the restaurant's needs, I think, is important. So we're explaining to them that, we're not trying to make you a digital company or an internet company. We want you to stay in the kitchen, keep doing what you love, serving customers. We want to help automate some of the stuff that you are trying to do right now that's manual. And I think that's the messaging that works for us. For example, right now, when you walk into a restaurant that isn't on Chope, they will be using a pen and a paper, and they're not going to remember if you've come back 10 times or 100 times or it's your first time. They're going to treat you the same each time. And that is fundamentally wrong, right? You should be rewarded as a loyal customer, and that is unthinkable in more modern businesses such as Chope, where we have a loyalty program, Grab loyalty program, MBS loyalty program. Why can't smaller restaurants run it's a proven technique, right? Loyalty rewarded. Why don't restaurants do that? Because they don't have the tools. So we have to make it easier for them and also automate a lot of what they're trying to do manually. Yeah.
So I'm going to go a little bit off the list here because I like what you said about the fact that when you go into a restaurant, they may not know whether you've come in for the first time or the second time because they don't have the right tools, etc. And loyalty programs are something that have been going on since before data and tech hit us. So where is this kind of convergence between knowing about your customers, especially in the service industry, versus just relying on the data and tools? Because sometimes just personally I experience that reliance is now getting a little too much where that personal touch may be forgotten. I said I was going off the list. And Dane told me it's a debate, so I
can buy you guys some time since I got us into this mess. So to us at Chope, we use the data to understand what we can provide people on the loyalty side, right? So, we've always been a tech business, so I can't speak about what it would have been like in a non-tech environment. But certainly we use the data to calculate, for example, what the return cohort rates are for our users, what types of users come back, and we calculate what the lifetime customer value of our customers, and that enables us to provide them with rewards that are commensurate to that and still, make a return, still be profitable because we know how much they're going to spend over their lifetime, right? We're buying a lifetime of customer usage, not one time. So we use that data to calculate it. But when we're actually executing it or implementing the loyalty program, that doesn't mean that we approach it in a very automated or AI or bot way. We do try and take personal initiatives. For example, we still have to hold VIP events where we bring a lot of our loyal customers in, meet them face to face, and there's no substitute for that, right? We do that in every single market. It's something they like doing. The loyal diners is something we learn a lot from. So I think you have to marry the data part with the human touch. You don't substitute it. Yeah.
So let me just add, I think, 2 points of what you have just said. That's a tough question. But if I can distill it down simply into 2 areas that I feel marketers should look at. Number 1, I think, is the question of the customer need. So exactly what does that need? Does that need to be fulfilled based on the personal touch, or could that need be fulfilled digitally through tech? I think that's one question that we need to ask, first and foremost, as part of the process. The other way of looking at this question particularly, I would say, is that in some cases, and I go back to my earlier point about how we are defining brand today, the need may well be met, not necessarily by how we define a brand experience today. Because maybe all the customer wants is just speed. They don't need you to do the face-to-face, the warm, but at the particular juncture in time of the customer journey, all they need is speed. And maybe that is something which tech can solve. EDB is trialing some of these activities in the US. We launched a platform called the Content Marketing Automation Platform. The idea is that we understand that in the customer journey process for a B2B business, there'll be a point in time whereby the customer is ready to talk to EDB because they want to invest in Singapore. But just before that stage, they may be well trying to get information. And in today's world, the speed of information is no way in hell a real person could do that quite quickly. So the role of content marketing automation helps to feed that content at the time when they need it. That's one example. My last example, I guess, is the example where we see around us, for example, in DBS Bank, right? In your book, there was a good example to say that actually the whole idea of banking is a means to an end. I don't go to a bank because I want to go to a bank, but I just need to get something done to do something else. So if you believe in that need, then all you need to do is to think about how do you convert that into an automated process so that the whole journey is so much more seamless for the customer.
Okay, so I agree with what both of you have said. It's about automation and hitting your customer at the right part of the journey and the information that needs to be provided to them. It's also about the human touch. It's about giving the the customer the right experience, because everything about well, what we do at Marine Bay Sands is about the customer experience and how are they going to feel, what are they going to take out of it. So it's a fine balance between knowing the data, the information that is provided, and then working with each of the interfaces, whether it be at a restaurant or the shopping tours or whatever it might be, that the immersive experience is top-notch. So.
We are agreeing too much.
Yes, too much.
We're not
debating.
We're not debating.
So maybe we'll shift gears a little from a consumer to your partnerships. So now with the way everything is changing in brand and marketing data tech, naturally the role of the agency and the kind of skills that you need from your partners is also changing. So maybe Dane, you can kick this off and tell us, what would you be looking from an agency partner now that's different from, say, 5 years ago or maybe even 3 years ago?
I think the challenge with trying to find the right partners today from the marketing client side of the business is that there's a lot out there. There's a lot out there, and I think we are trying to make sense of how do we find the right fit, so on and so forth. 5 years ago, for example, just an example, right? So when EDB looks for an agency partner to work with, we would assume that we'll find that one agency or a couple of agencies, and then they will be there for us for the long term, right? It's a long relationship that we're trying to build. And I think in many ways that remains true to some extent. But increasingly, if you think about the nature of marketing and what we need to do, it's really about understanding what is that job that needs to be done. In fact, I force my own teams to ask that question. So exactly what is that job that you need to do, and who is the best person to do that job? So the conversation, fortunately, unfortunately, has shifted to a place where you're trying to define the problem at hand quite specifically. You may not be looking at a time cycle of 5 years or 4 years for the relationship, but you may be looking at it on a project basis. So that's the conversation that's happening, I think, internally. And these are the questions that we do ask our own teams as well. And that will impact the way we design the scope of work, we design and put out the tenders and so forth. And the shift is actually quite drastic in the last couple of years, I would say.
Yeah, you can't seem to have a one-stop shop anymore. It's brand, there's performance, there's events, there's so many different specialists that you need to tap into. There's content development. Creative agencies can't create brand campaigns and content information that we need to pump out for the appetite of our consumers in the breadth of time that they've got. So we're starting to work with different types of agencies that we might put a brief out for $5,000 to $10,000 to create a spot, and we'll have 5 or 6 different countries from around the world come together to create something for us that could actually pump out the content. And so we're finding that that's the same approach that we're having with how we need to think about performance, how we need to think about brand, and strategy and media. So it's I'm agreeing with you again.
Arif, can you not agree with them and just say something completely radical?
But I made, that was the point that I'm quoted on the slide as saying that you cannot do everything in-house, so I can't disagree with myself, right? I guess the only part I'll add is that the challenge for a smaller company like Chope, we're not the size of MBS, we're not tiny either, I guess, is that we are not sure how much of our stuff we can afford to outsource either, right? There are some capabilities that we want to build in-house, and just because we don't have them today, it doesn't mean we outsource them and never build them. So for example, understanding our data better. Every day I'm approached by 3, 4 companies that say, hey, we can do data analysis for you. We can come up with better personalized recommendations for your users. We decided actually, you know what? We're going to try and do this in-house. So we hired our first couple of data scientists. And it's been an incredible shift in our understanding of how our users, what they're looking for, predictive algorithms. So while we could have outsourced that, I think it was a conscious decision to slow it down and do it in-house, because we know that 2, 3 years down the road, we need to have this. We need to have it. Yeah.
I think EDB takes a slightly different approach. So I think we try to have the best of both worlds if we can, but I know it's a challenge. I think on one end, the ideal situation is that our teams are fairly integrated marketeers. That means that I would expect them to have some generalist skill sets across the board, because a lot of times they are doing a lot of project management. So I think for me that is quite important. So typically if we need specialist functions, we would therefore go out to work with agencies for a very specific need, and that needs get solved, and then we move on. So that's some agility, I think, from that perspective. But we also recognize that at the same time, I work with a team of, we talked about young people and millennials, and I work with millennials too. So at the same time, they also are quite interested in change, and they want to change roles and things like that. So we need to create that opportunities for them to grow within the organization too. So increasingly, we're also recognizing that maybe there are certain skill sets that we need some deep expertise, and that's where you sort of bring some of these areas in-house. Obviously, the obvious ones are things like digital, social, but increasingly could well be areas on like client engagement, because that in itself, it's relationship building, and it makes sense for you to have that deep expertise in that area too.
So now if you just look at Asia, and we all know Asia is diverse, and each country is different. But at the same time, it sometimes gets extremely inefficient from a marketing point of view when Thailand puts its hand up and says, but I'm nothing like Indonesia. And Indonesia says, you bet I'm not like China. And China is like, of course I'm not like India. And it just goes on. So how do you do that balance between trying to have as much localization, but at the same time not at keeping your efficiencies intact, and that does not get
That's my daily challenge, if not monthly and yearly. From a brand perspective, obviously we launched the Never Settle campaign with David Beckham, who is still our ambassador, but we were finding that it didn't matter which country we went into, whether it was China or Korea. We, again, needed to do digging, a lot of digging from research to understand our customers and what was going to motivate them to come to not only Singapore, but Marina Bay Sands. And I might be going a little bit off track here, but we found that obviously what was it, the human truth of Koreans versus Japanese or Malaysians to come and visit not only Singapore but Marina Bay Sands would be different motivators. So we have to be tactically led under the umbrella of a brand campaign and a grand notion of whether it's Never Settle or Coming Alive. What does it really mean for those particular markets? And we have to push out content, which is why I was saying before that we're looking at different alternatives. And we do have in-house brand advertising divisions and social and digital, but we have to be flexible, and we have to make sure that our tactics are speaking to the bespoke markets, which is it's a nuance that we have to finesse every day. Yeah, keeps me busy.
Anything to add?
Yeah, when we started, this is my first company. When we went to new cities, we approached it in pretty much replicating what we'd done in Singapore. And then obviously the teams that we hired there, the local teams, would say, no, this is a totally different market. We got to start from scratch. Don't do anything that you're doing in Singapore. And they almost went to the other extreme and just started making the same mistakes that we had made in the early days in Singapore, right? We had reached a certain level of success here. And we saw them making the same mistakes. And funnily enough, we arrived at very similar ending points, okay? We know what appeals to diners. For example, if you give a 1-for-1 discount, it's going to work everywhere well, I can't speak for cities we're not in, but every one of the cities we're in, if you give a good discount, you're going to get people booking at your restaurants. That is unanimous. And some people will say, oh, but Hong Kongers are very brand conscious and Indonesians are very discount driven. Doesn't matter, right? There's segments that exist in all markets. The things that do change, I think, are very tactical things: language, channel, content, brand ambassadors, things like that. But I think that one is a surface level change that you can, with enough money, time, and thought, act on that. So for example, using Line in Thailand, using WeChat in Shanghai. Yeah, those are pretty obvious things, right?
Anything to add, Dean?
So maybe let me give everyone a real example, a real complex example of what we've been up to with STB and MCI. So recently, as some of you may know, we actually launched a new Singapore brand. So it's called Passion Made Possible. So obviously everyone has plenty of comments about what you think about the brand, but let me just give you some insight about what I'm trying to communicate here. I think the idea of how do you then try to adapt into the markets, and not just to that, but at the Singapore level, how do you try to adapt that to the different needs of the different agencies, right? Because STB deals with tourism, we deal with business, and then we have other agencies that we want to bring on board this entire brand platform. So I think the response to that is, I think, in two ways. The very first one is think very hard at the upstream level in the brand design. Think about how do you want to unify your stakeholders and audiences together. And I feel that a lot of what Arif talked about, Andre talked about, is perfectly exactly what we have done. It's going back to the idea of what exactly is that human spirit, or what exactly is that DNA that defines us. And that's how we started. That journey was actually quite evolutionary, as in we started talking to Singaporeans and all that, and just trying to distill exactly what are those values that define us. This morning, I don't know whether some of you read it, but there was an op-ed by Professor Tommy Cole. He wrote a little bit about, well, he's gone past, or he's going to reach 80 years old, and he was invited by the Straits Times to write an op-ed about what he thinks of Singapore and what he wants. One of the stories was really about how Singapore actually is defined very much in terms of cognitive excellence. So we're very good at doing stuff, but we don't do so well emotionally. But we are a little bit held back in the expression and all that. So I think we sort of realized that in the whole brand journey, and we said, well, is there a way for us to define passion quite differently? Is there a way for Asians or Singaporeans or Singapore to define passion in the way that we know it best, right? So that's how the brand journey starts. So going back to the upstream, keeping to the values and principles, and start that story from there. I think that's one approach, so that it gives you maximum flexibility as you go into many markets. I feel that whichever business we're in, whether government, private sector, I think people can respond and unite to common values and principles. So starting from there where people care about. The second part of it, I feel, is at the strategic level, is to design a brand system that is as adaptive as possible. Right, so don't be too trapped. And when we first received training on brand, we were very trapped in structures and form and all that. But free yourself from there and ask yourself, can things be done differently to allow many markets to adapt? So that you don't go into a challenge where Ari have talked about, where the market will say, completely doesn't suit me at all. So I think that's one exercise, and just constantly talking to people. I think as we engage, we learn so much more, and allow the brand to evolve to the new markets they're going into.
Again, you all agreed, but then they were all very good points, so I don't have anything to refute. So I'm going to ask because I want to keep some time, maybe if the audience has questions, my wrap-up question, which is the dreaded M word, which is not umbrella, it is the millennials, who scare me because, like you, I'm in that side of 40. What would be your advice be for, I'm sure you get a lot of calls and you get job applications and LinkedIn requests, etc. So what would your advice be to a millennial who wants to join your organization?
Am I going first? Okay. There's a laundry list of things, but I think one of them, and you just mentioned it before, Dane, passion is, if you're not passionate about the brand or the company that you're working for or working with, then it makes things very difficult because there's a sense of, I want it yesterday, opposed to patience and working hard at something. So be passionate, be progressive, and definitely, if you can, really understand that EQ, that emotional intelligence that you will need to arm yourself to deal with matrix organizations and companies.
So EDB is a fairly young organization. We have a lot of people, I think, under 30s or just crossing into their 30s. So they'll fit quite well into the millennial segment. I mean, I think my experience working with young people has been that I enjoy the energy that they bring. I enjoy the fact that it's a group of people that are less afraid to ask tough questions today, and I like that a lot because I feel that we are all constantly on this journey to learn. And I think that's the process, and I hope that the millennials that come into the market don't get hit and become disillusioned by the fact that your questions are not being answered or you are not convinced, but keep asking those questions, because I think you have a role to help also educate people like me right? So keep that tension going, because I think it's a good tension, because it forces us to then relook at things differently, but simply because things are moving so quickly. So keep that spirit up.
Yeah, I want to dispute that whole dreaded millennial perception. I think millennials or young people or old people, the divide is not about age, it's about capabilities, about aggression, about willingness, right? So we've suddenly had our share of younger people who didn't work out. We've also had our share of older people who didn't work out. You know, people who weren't aggressive enough, people who turned up at 9 a.m., want to leave at 5 p.m. And that's not a startup mindset. On the other hand, we have had young people who've come in and said, you know what, throw me in the deep end, and if I do well there, throw me in even deeper water, because I want to find where, you know, where's the point at which I really can't handle anymore, and then at that point we'll figure it out. Like, maybe you need to find a mentor for me at that point. So I think that attitude is something is more important than categorization by a generation or an age group. So yeah, so I fundamentally don't see any difference in the younger age groups and the older ones, but I do see a huge difference in people who walk in and say, I want to move fast and break things and be challenged. They might come from any age group. Yeah.
Okay, that's interesting. So for the old-timers like me, it's more about mindset, and for the young millennials, it's more about exhibiting some patience, which I kind of like that word too, because there is a learning curve to get from where you are to there. And I guess the mentoring and the coaching works on both sides. Reverse mentoring now is a very good, very big thing, and I think it's excellent to have younger people or the people who've been born in this digital age to teach, as well as the experience of an old-timer, so as to speak, from a strategic or an overview point of view. So both parties can actually help and work each other. Now I'll have to get up and see the time. Okay, so we have 7 minutes, so we did good on time. Any questions from the audience? Yes, please. The mic is coming.
Sorry, but the furthest point from the mic. Hello. Hi. My question is for Arif or for any of you on the panel, but Arif, just on your most recent point around the, trusting in one of your millennial staff to give them an opportunity to stretch and then stretch some more until they get to the point where, maybe they're out of their depth and they need some help.
Sure.
Break things or fail fast, move forward.
Sure.
I work for a relatively old organisation, quite conservative, also on the other side of 40. And I guess that there, for me, there needs to be some kind of middle ground, because the barrier to that mentality is, number one, overcoming older associates or leaders' perceptions, but also the fact that you still have a business to run and it needs to be run profitably and successfully. So how do you balance between those two?
Okay, I feel that was directed at me, so I'll take that one head on. You're absolutely right. It's a challenge that we're facing as we get larger, right? Come back to the example of, when we were adapting our strategy regionally, we saw things that worked. And the attitude again was, that stuff doesn't work for us, we'll try different things. And we came back and we found that actually the stuff that worked at point A worked at point B. So sometimes it is you're right, it's a middle ground. The people who have been there, done that for many years do have to say, okay, I hear you, I see that I might be a little bit outdated, I'm still on Facebook and you're on Instagram, maybe I got to figure out that stuff. But at the same time, let me tell you, like, maybe for us, content marketing is a low ROI initiative and we should be doing search marketing. And so some of those principles of how people react and what is good for our business is still true. And I think a lot of that is compromised on both sides and is driven by data. For us, certainly as a young organization, we don't argue in terms of I believe, you believe, I've seen this, you did that, my ex-company did this. We do it as like, okay, here's the LTCV of our average user. He books 2 times a month. He generates a revenue of $7 per booking. What is the LTC? What is the CAC that we can spend to acquire this user? And if your test it, by the way, do a lot of testing. If your test shows that we're not getting a CAC below LTCV, then it's just not going to work for us. And I think that's the attitude that we adopt to it, rather than I believe, you believe. Yeah. So within those bounds, go wild, right? You want to try new things. You want to do, I don't know, billboards or balloons or whatever. As long as you stick within the bounds of what the data is telling us works, we're happy with that.
Yes.
Hi, thanks very much for that great discussion, debate or panel. I asked this question because I wrote an article on Mumbrella about a week and a half ago around the similar discussion, around the convergence of marketing communication teams coming together. If they already haven't, that's going to continue. The interesting piece is that it started a discussion on LinkedIn, and one of the points was around the restructuring of marketing comms teams to be centred around the customer journey. So rather than being marketing or comms or product or sales, the future of that would be to be focused around the customer journey or customer experience. So I'm keen to get your views on what's the future of the new marketing comms teams.
Okay, I'll start with that. We are actually in the process of what we call 1MBS, which is our whole, if you like to think of it as like drinking the Kool-Aid. I was an ex-Disney person, so I can say that. But what we've had to do with the focus of the customer journey is to actually focus internally first on our brand values. And this has been a process that we've been going through for the last 2 years. And this year, in fact, hopefully by the end of this year, we would have also put our 9,500 crew that work here, we call them TMs, team members, through that whole service strategy as well. Because whether you are front of house at the hotel, whether you are a waiter in a restaurant, or you are in one of the stores, it's about the final touch point with the customer and the consumer, and making them feel that they're absolutely extra special. I always like to say you want to make people feel like a king or a queen when you're here, and that goes from room service to opening the door to saying goodbye. So it's been a very, very long journey for us to do that, but we're doing it right the way through on a horizontal, vertical level right across the business. So it's hugely important to us to have that customer journey right. Sorry, I waffled on a little bit there, but anyway.
I think it's pretty much along the same lines too. I'll just add on a few points. I think in the context of EDB, and I'll just give it an insight, right? So the people that we talk to are your business investors, and they come from a range of 30 different industry sectors, and they cut across people like the CEOs, the CTOs, the CFOs. You're talking across a range of different markets overseas. So I think the starting point is indeed the customer journey that you talked about. But I think beyond the customer journey, I thought what Aris said made perfect sense. And I think it's really about the data that you get about that journey. Understanding where are the areas where we could do better, right? So are there journey gaps that we can try to fulfill and do a better job with? I'll give an example, and we talked about that earlier. So in the journey that we painted out, we do know that in the context of Singapore, the problem here is not trying to market awareness, because I think people generally know Singapore. The challenge is how do you make them have that affinity with this country and would think about investing in this country, right? So I think once we do a good job building that affinity and the likability and the relevance for their business, then typically, based on our understanding at least, is that they will start looking for information. Now, the information search is we identify as a challenge for us, right? So we then ask ourselves, well, that's a problem for the customer, because when they want to think about coming to Singapore or go somewhere else, how do they find information today? Do they get the sort of information they need, and in what form? Would it be useful for them? Because you have to think about who's the one behind the scenes doing all the presentation decks, right? And how can you serve that customer a lot more efficiently compared to your competitors? So I think understanding that insight and then being able to deliver that value. And you ask yourself, is that value delivered best by a salesperson, or should that be automated? Remember, EDB has to serve many customers around the world 24/7, right? So when you need that information, there's no way we can try to make that a manual process. So that has to be automated. So I think understanding the journey, trying to design and understanding what is that job to be done, I think is absolutely critical. But I think I want to come back to the point about the millennials. And I think finally, my point is that if the team can pitch different solutions, right, and let the data tell you what it is, then it's a fun time because you get to experiment. Recently, I sent a late 20-year-old guy because he pitched the content marketing idea and said, okay, why don't you go to New York for 2 months and you try it out, right? And you do a pilot. The pilot was not for 20 over industry sectors, it was just for 2 sectors, for a very defined market. Just go and learn, go and try it out. If you screw up, you know what's going to happen to you, but just learn. So I think that's the way that I think, and some of us are in management positions in this room, so I think that's the risk, but it's also the trust that we need to be able to give to young people, because I think they have it in them, they have got the fire in the belly, and they've got the ambition, the purpose, and that's what makes marketing work so exciting, right?
So I think we have time just for one last question, if there is. No? So I think this table gets the prize. Go ask who asked the most questions. Thank you very much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you very much.